Would you like to create more drama with your stamps? In today's video, I'm sharing a top tip for how to make striking cards. I started this card by stamping one of the flowers from the Altenew Pristine Peonies set. And you'll see here, the card on the left is the finished card, the card on the right is the original stamp. So what we're doing is we're going to add in lines to make the floral image more prominent. To do that, we're going to make certain lines darker. So wherever you've got a petal overlaying another petal, you treat it in the same way as you would a shadow, and you add in black. Then when you've got these indents, again, you're going to add in some extra line weighting. So one part of the line is narrow, the other part of the line is darker. You'll notice I'm starting at the bottom of each of the petals. I'm not starting at the top, so I'm doing the thicker part first. And I outline first and then I colour in. When I was designing this card, I spent a bit of time practicing the line work, and I found that if I started the other way round at the thin end, I ended up making it too thick. So I decided that it was better to actually start at the bottom, do a thinner line, and then add more depth as and when I needed to. So you'll see that I'm going round each of the lines. In this particular instance, pay attention to anything where it's got a double line next to each other. So for this one on the right, I've gone to the right of the line, and on the left line, I've gone to the left a little bit more. And you can see there, I'm having to touch it up a little bit because it went a bit offset. So I'm just going back over it very slowly to make it a little bit tidier. All of this is done in real time, so this is something that you take your time with. There's no rush. Treat it as almost like a bit of mindfulness, because it's quite calming as you're going around doing the petals and the lines one by one. So just take your time with it. When you try and do it too fast, I know from experience, you end up messing it up. So just start at the bottom with those lines. Again, this petal's overlaying the next one, so I'm just going in with a line to create that depth. Same with the other side. And then what you'll notice as the line work goes on is that I'm only focusing on the flower. I'm not actually going to do anything with the leaves. I want the flower to be the focal point of the image. So I'm doing everything to make that flower pop. So now I'm going around the edges, and you'll see I've gone both sides of that petal, and then I'm just adding that definition to that V shape. I then go on to the next petal, and I'm just going underneath where I think there would be a bit of a shadow. So I keep going round the edges as before, just to create that depth. And I will go underneath, so on the outer part of that flower, and I'm just thinking this through as I'm drawing. I'm tidying up the lines, but at the same time I'm thinking about what I'm going to do with those outer edges of the petals. And I've decided that I'm going to colour them in, so you'll see that in a sped up version in a bit. And the reason for this is, again, it just means the leaves get pushed behind and the buds get pushed behind, and the flower stays top and centre. So I'm going round, finishing off these lines. You'll see we've got another couple of lines close together again. So I'm just going either side of those. Apologies, that's my little puppy. She just wants to constantly play today. So as you can see here, I am now going outside of that flower and just separating it from those leaves. Before we get into the colouring, let me know what your favourite colouring technique is. Another thing I just want to note there before we finish is I'm leaving the two left petals as if they're light, so as if they're in the top right is where all the shadow is, and then I've got the light coming in from the left, like you would with the colouring. So now I'm going in with Artist Marker WG01, which I think is Evening Grey, but I will detail it properly at the bottom. It's either Evening Grey or Morning Frost or something completely different, know me, because I probably messed it up. But anyway, it's one of the warm greys, and I'll detail it below for you so that you have the exact one. And I'm using that together with a colourless blender to colour the petals. So you will see that I'm using a flicking motion. I'm being very gentle here, but I'm also doing it quite quickly. And the reason for this is if I don't, I'll overthink it and then I'll end up putting down too much colour or making it a bit too blocky. What I want to do is kind of emanate the strokes that you get in a flower. So I'm going in with that WG01. Now when I was designing the card and practicing this, I actually went in with WG03 and then I also used WG01, but it made it a bit too dark, so I decided to go lighter. This card is based on a class in Altenew called Elements of Floral Composition, had to think then, by J.C. Gasper, and it's all about elements of art. So you have line, form, texture, shape. I'm trying to concentrate here. My little puppy is now actually pulling my sleeve as I'm working on this. But anyway, I'll tell you about her for a minute because she obviously wants to be in the picture. So she is called Daisy and she's 10 months old. And she is an adorable little puppy, but she's all of a sudden turned into a teenager and wants all of my attention. But she is very adorable. She likes to be out in nature. She will run through every single mud puddle possible. She will flick her nose up in rivers. She's an absolute tomboy of a dog in comparison to our princess of a dog that we used to have, who was very much an indoor dog, didn't like to get her feet dirty, wanted to walk in puddles. Anyway, more about the card. So back to the card, I'd blended out that colourless blender, and once it was dry, I went in with my Prismacolor pencils to add some depth. So you'll see that I'm not using a circular technique like you would normally with Prismacolors, but I'm using strokes. So again, I'm going quite quickly because otherwise I overthink it, but you can slow down on this if you want to. So I start with the darker colour, work my way around, and then I go in with the lighter colour to draw that colour out. So it's just adding a little bit more focus to the centre of the card. And for the very centre, we're going to do something a bit different. But for this part, it's just drawing the eye into the centre of that flower. So I'm not pressing very hard with these pencils. I'm just doing that flicking motion again and drawing that colour out. What I meant to say actually when I was doing the colourless blending, where I'd done the WG01 with a light touch, I actually used more pressure with the colourless blender to draw that colour out so it wasn't going to be too dark. So I used two different levels of pressure depending on which colour I was using. I say colour because it was colourless blender, but which pen I was using. So I'm just flicking this out until I'm happy with it and blending it out, and then we'll focus on the centre once I've done that. It's very hard to show the colour, but hopefully you can see now we're starting to get some depth in the middle. So I'm going in now with Prismacolor Espresso pencil. And I'm just working my way around the centre. I'm pressing quite hard. I want it to burnish quite quickly. So with Prismacolors you burnish into the paper, which means you press hard once you're ready with the final element. And I'm not doing traditional Prismacolor colouring there. I'm just using it as a thick pencil and just colouring in as you would with a normal pencil. So now I've picked up my Unipin 0.5 pen again, and I'm just colouring in the little dots. I don't know what they're called actually. For some reason I just cannot remember the name of what they're called. Call it menopausal brain fog, but it's just a way of adding definition to the centre. So I'm just working my way around that centre and colouring all the little seeds. Just adding some chocolate brown into the centre of the flower to give again a bit more depth. This card is all about drawing your eye into the centre, and then I'm going in with the warm grey again just to fill in any little gaps that are coming up so that it's completely filled and there's no white showing. So that's the flower finished. Next I die cut the flower and then cut 2 additional die cuts. As you can see, this is from pre-used cardstock. This is the one that I was doing before as practice. I laid the 2 scrap pieces with glue underneath the main coloured image to create a stacked die cut. So I'm just showing you the Altenew Cadillac of brushes, as Laura Basson would call them. This is a blending brush by Altenew, and I've die cut a single stitched rectangle die, and I'm going in with the evening grey to create a little bit of colour on it. So I'm just using the blending brush to blend over some of that evening grey over the background. This will create a darker backdrop to the flower. The flower's obviously very white, so this will create a darker backdrop for it to sit on. Once the panel's complete, I'll then attach that to a white card base with double-sided tape, and then I will attach the flower on top of it. So as you can see, I'm just testing it to make sure that it's going to work, and next we're coming on to doing some water splats. So I'm using the Altenew 14 pan metallic set, and I'm using sterling silver. So I'm just spritzing that with some water to get the pigments to start flowing. I think that's how you say it. I sound like I know what I'm talking about, don't I? And then I've got the 24 pan set from the artist set from Altenew, and I'm spraying Rock Collection. So that's an almost black colour. So here's where I was saying I was layering everything together and attaching the flower on top using that double-sided tape. So really all that's left is the splats and the sentiment, and as you can see, I put the flower on before I'd actually done the splats. So I carefully removed it. This is what it's really like in the card making world. I carefully removed it and then added some splats with my paintbrush. If you find that you are, well, first of all, I use a little acrylic block to do my splats, and then I get a brush and just flick it off the side. So I've got a brush dedicated to doing splats, one that I find works really well. If you find that you're not getting splats, proper splats, then just add a little bit more water to your pan. You can spritz the block, but it can get a bit runny, so it's better to do it in the pan and then just carry on around the card with your splats. I wanted to try and get a good even coverage across the whole card. You will actually see that I make a big boo-boo and I end up with a really big black splodge of paint on one side, but I managed to hide it, so it's all good. So that was me adding a little bit of water onto the mat, and that's where my problem came in, I think, because I did too much water and end up with a really big blob, which you'll see when I set the card to one side. I'd also used the metallic silver. Here I stamped the sentiment from Pristine Peonies, and now I'm showing you that I also laid the bigger die on the piece of paper, and I'm just creating some coloured cardstock for that to sit on. So I die cut that out, die cut the sentiment out in white and attach the two, and there is the finished card. Pop over to my blog to find written instructions for this card and also 2 additional cards that I made as part of this blog post. I would absolutely love it if you would like, share, comment, subscribe to my blog and my YouTube channel and leave me a comment. It really does make my day. Is there a product or technique you'd like me to feature in my next video? Share your requests and suggestions in the comments below.